female student athletes based on athletic ability, scholarship, leadership, and citizenship. The recipients of the 2020 awards are Samantha DiPaolo and John Harrington. The next set of awards that we had for our senior athletes were the Mo Connolly Trophy and also the Slauson Brothers Trophy. Those are both awarded to a senior boy and senior girl on the basis of character and athletic ability. The recipient of those awards were Caitlin O'Rourke and Kyle Roach. So obviously, specific congratulations to those senior student athletes. As I conclude, I would be remiss if I did not mention and include our spring senior student athletes, wishing them the best of luck in their future endeavors, similar to how we celebrate the end of each athletic season for our seniors. 2020 was certainly a difficult spring that no one in our lifetime will ever forget. It has left an emptiness and feeling of lost opportunity among schools, towns, and communities, student athletes, coaches, and athletic administrators, not being able to create relationships, share memories, promote teachable moments, enjoy the sounds of competition in an athletic venue, and celebrate the end of playing careers during senior night. I end by saying thank you to our seniors and reminding our seniors that once a Womp, always a Womp.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, at this time, we'll move on to gift approvals.
Would you like, you want to, I don't know if anyone might have any questions with these or.
By all means, any other comments or questions as far as the report so far?
Mr. Chair, I'll
Please, Mr. Kokoris.
like to make a comment. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that update. We're always very proud of the athletic accomplishments in Braintree, and I think the thing that we're most proud of is a lot of our students move on to other endeavors in college and continue to do well and make us proud. So I thank you for the update, and I look forward to seeing what this next class of seniors will do as they further their career in sports in the collegiate level. So thanks again.
Well, thank you very much. And obviously, our school and our community is a huge part of our athletic department. In the coming days, you will see that we will be doing senior tributes to our student athletes from the spring season. So please, if you get an opportunity, take a look on Twitter and you will see those tributes.
Okay. Okay, moving on. I guess we'll go to gift to schools. Again, thank you, Mike. Appreciate your report and the success of all of our student athletes. Gifts to schools. Number one, we have South Coastal Career Development Agency, a gift to schools totaling $6,000. One check in the amount of $6,000 from South Coastal Career Development Agency for the fiscal year 20 Connecting Activities Grant. I'll entertain a motion to accept in a second.
Motion to accept.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Our second is Bay State Textiles, gifts to schools totaling $4.25. One check in the amount of $4.25 from Bay State Textiles. I'll entertain a motion and a second to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. A roll call vote to accept these gifts. Mr. Mayor,
Aye.
Ms. Soros,
Aye.
Ms. Cobb-Lemaire.
I have a question. What is the South Shore Career Development Agency? Sorry.
No worries. So that the gift itself is allowed us to increase our business ed opportunities at the high school. We're expanding the career credit for life. Fair to all seniors this year. That of those funds. Unfortunately, with the school closure, that did not happen, and we will be carrying over any unspent funding into next year, given the fact that it is a grant. I don't know specifically what the South Coastal Career Development Agency is, but I'm assuming it's on the South Coast and it does career development. But I could find out more information if you're interested.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I.
Okay. Ms. Dolan?
Aye.
Mr. Kokoris?
Aye.
Mr. Chafe?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Unanimous to accept these gifts. As always, to all the people out there that donate monies and other things that help us bridge some of the gaps, thank you very much. Always appreciative. Moving on, going to section 3, which is from the superintendent and staff.
So unfortunately,
Presentation of the yearbook.
presentation of the yearbook from the yearbook group that put it together lacks a little bit of luster when in fact we're not in person. I do have a copy of it in front of me. We have 2 in the office, one that stays here and one for the school committee. I can tell you that it is beautiful as usual. It's just a great amount of work and did a great job with it. And I would imagine that this is a yearbook that would be very special for particularly for the senior class of 2020, given the year that we've had. So when we get back together, be sure to pass around so that you can see it. But again, it lacks a little bit of just excitement when in fact we're not able to be in person. I would like to, if the chair does not mind, move on to the Ross Elementary School Gaga Pit. We do have Jen Fay with us this evening, who can speak a little bit to the PTO.
Please do. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to come to the meeting from home. Had I known the cameras were not be on, I probably wouldn't have washed my hair tonight, but anywho, we're really excited to speak to you a little bit about installing a Gaga pit at Ross Elementary School. In the fall, when I first came to Ross, one of the concerns was recess. It seemed that there were a lot of conflicts that tended to disrupt the rest of the school day. So after about 6 or 8 weeks, I talked with BCBAs in the school system, I talked with other principals, and we decided that we needed a few more specific games or tools and toys to play with outside that could help a group of students play. Like some of them did a great job with soccer. One of the grades, they set up their nets and they had a full-on soccer game, and others really struggled just to pick teams and decide who to throw a football or a basketball. So one of the latest, I guess fads is the Gaga pit. And Flaherty had done this a few years ago. They were the pioneers. They installed a Gaga pit on the grass at Flaherty. And then Hollis's PTO purchased a portable Gaga pit this year, and they put it up on the blacktop behind the school. So we talked to both schools and we went out to visit to see what the Gaga pits look like, asked how many students could play at a time, looked it up on YouTube because most of us didn't know what a Gaga pit was. And when we talked to students, many got very excited. They either knew someone who had one at their playground or they had played with it at camp. This was also our first year doing the Ross Fun Run, and the PTO wanted to put together a really meaningful list of items to purchase with any of the profits. And so with recess being one of our shared goals, we decided a Gaga pit would be number 1, sensory paths in the building and other calm classroom type of aids to create mindful corners would be number 2, and flexible seating would be number 3. The Gaga pit, we did find out was about $6,600, including installation. We had hoped, had school been in process, we probably would have had it installed at the end of this school year, but we're hoping to have it installed mid-August so that it will be ready for our return to school. So the funds that they did, they were able to profit about $10,000 in fundraising from the fun run. And so the PTO approved it, and now we're looking for approval from you.
And just for the committee's the information, the gift is in the amount of $6,500. So we would ask that you take a vote of approval for that donation for Gaga Pit for Ross Elementary School. And would be really hopeful and really be exciting if we could actually use it in September.
It would be.
Okay, at this time, I believe I'll need a motion and a second to shall we say, accept the monies that were spent on this Gaga pit, so to speak?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kokoros, a second by Ms. Soros. Roll call vote. Mr. Mayor,
Aye.
Ms. Soros,
Aye.
Ms. Cobb-Lemare,
Aye.
Ms. Dolan,
Aye.
Mr. Kokoros,
Aye.
Mr. Chave.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That's unanimous to accept this. Thank you very much for your work on this. I think it's a worthwhile project. We've seen them in the past and how, energized the people get. So, Ms. Fay, thank you for your work.
Thank you very much, and I'm very grateful to Ross's PTO. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ms.
Thanks,
Fay.
Jen.
Okay, moving on. Let's see. We got the Ross. I believe we got administrative updates. Dr. Hackett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
So we also have with us this evening Dr. Scully from the high school to talk us through the exciting day coming up on the 13th on this Saturday, which is hard to believe as much as we've been talking about this. But to walk us through a little bit more of the details of the Rolling Rally graduation ceremony, which, as you know, is one of two ceremonies for the senior class of 2020. So with that, Dr. Scully.
Thank you, Dr. Hackett, and thank you, everybody, for having me tonight. You can see from the slide that we have a route, but before I get to that, I just want to second what Dr. Hackett said. We have a two-phase graduation plan this year, so we're actually very excited about both parts. Over the last 2 weeks, we've had students seniors returning textbooks and settling up debts. But then last week, they were able to pick up all of their graduation attire, caps and gowns, cords, sashes. They also had a chance to get senior gifts that the senior advisors and the senior class officers have put together. And also at the end of that process, they were able to pick up a free lunch from Fasano's food truck, thanks to their generosity. So the seniors are well prepped and ready to go for this Saturday's ceremony. The ceremony actually starts Friday night. I was out filming with some of the student speakers who are excellent, and I think people are really going to enjoy what they have to say. We are putting together a brief video program, which sort of takes the place of, if you imagine a traditional graduation, the first 20 or 30 minutes of that ceremony. So you'll hear from the student speakers. We'll recognize students who have made certain accomplishments, and we'll recognize them in the ceremony. And that'll take place Friday night. Saturday morning, we are queuing up. We're assembling at the RMV lot, and we will proceed as a group, following part of the traditional parade route past Town Hall, and then we'll cut across and onto the school property. Once we're on BHS, and once we go by the access road, once we enter the access road, the group of the column, I suppose, will split by house. They'll go 2 by 2 all the way down to the rear traffic circle. That's where we'll be able to observe and cheer on and celebrate everybody taking part, all of the seniors and their families. And then house 1 will go to the rear faculty lot to receive their diploma. House 2 and 3 will split again, travel around the side of the building, and receive their diplomas in the front lots. When students receive their diplomas, again, this is one student per car. They're riding with families. They have a chance to get out. They have a chance to get their diploma. We've studied our DESE and DPH guidance, and they'll receive their diploma in a safe way, sort of placed on a table. They get a chance to receive it. And then we have this year 3 different Life Touch photographers available to take professional photos of each graduate in front of a suitable backdrop with their diplomas. I just wanted to add, sort of when we talked about the route and sort of the arrangements, is that we've had a chance the last 2 weeks to work very closely with the Braintree Police Department, who really have been incredible about the process. We realize that this is a BHS graduation, but in this format, it's a full town event, and they've been very supportive and very thoughtful, and great suggestions for how we can make it a success for everybody involved, and hopefully have it proceed at a reasonable rate, since we want it to be fun for the kids and families, and reasonable for everybody taking part. So I could take individual questions on it. Just wanted to emphasize again, so we have a graduation plan that takes place in phases. Friday night, you'll get a chance, everybody will get a chance to hear the recorded speeches, hear certain students recognized, and this is in line with what we've done all spring. If you haven't had a chance, our scholarship night will be going up very shortly. Our academic awards have been posted in a virtual ceremony. So along those lines, in that very much in that same manner, that'll be Friday night. Saturday morning, we have our rolling rally, parade style, diploma distribution, and then later in July, on the 30th, we are looking to follow the social distancing protocols that are in place and the guidance that we've been given from the state, and have a in-person sit-down ceremony in the stadium. The exact format of that will be determined at a later date based on conditions in the state, and also how many sign up. But we're excited about Saturday. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to watch from the parade route. The campus itself is not open for viewing or observation, since we have so many vehicles moving through it, but residents and other family members are encouraged to find a spot along the route, cheer their graduates, and take part in the event.
Dr. Scully, could you speak to just the role of the school committee, or where school committee and any town councilors and other so-called dignitaries might be, so that everyone knows that?
Absolutely. So, town officials are people can watch wherever they would like, but town officials are encouraged to maybe choose town hall as the place to observe and congratulate the graduates. I think that's going to be probably the the most picturesque portion of the whole morning. Will be going right past town hall and the library, and seeing the sign with the graduate's name, the huge sign that's out in front of town hall, thanks to the generous and thoughtful parents who have put everything together. For school committee, and for myself, and for Dr. Hackett and Mr. Lee, anyone from the central office who would like to watch, we're looking to be located, if you go back to the on-campus slide, you'll see the red dot that is below the B representing the school. If you're following the symbols, and I have to thank Ms. Hurley for putting this together on short notice. We sort of gave her a few scribbled notes, and she turned it into this graphic, which I think is very professional and helps quite a bit. So if you come all the way down the access road, you'll see the red dot. It's right where House 2 and 3 and House 1 split. And if you're thinking of that, that is the beginning of the rear traffic circle. If you've been by there lately, there's a rotary sign. Right now, there are 2 barriers, because when we did morning drop-off, that was a factor. But everybody is welcome to park in the director's lot, which is right next to that, and then just walk right up that driveway to observe the students as they come in.
Perfect. And just to manage everyone's expectations, the 255-pound swan that you see in Sunset Lake, we were not able to book that, so there will be no swan. So we hope that's not a disappointment. But and Dr. Scully, I have to admit, if there are any teenage drivers driving, I'm a little nervous about being where that red dot is, but I have full confidence in you.
Yes, I share your initial disappointment at the swan. That was a late scratch. But the students are riders only. We ask them to ride with their families. One, so the parents can drive, but also 2, when they get to their diploma station, we want them to have a special moment, but we also want the process to keep going, so they can get right out on the passenger side, and their housemaster and the diploma station and the photo station will be right there for them. So Dr. Hackett, if you're nervous, I can leave a few of the barriers up as well, just so you can have a little bit of protection.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Scully.
Dr. Scully?
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Scully, it's Kelly. What time is the car parade?
We will be stepping off shortly after 9 a.m.
Okay,
Everybody is encouraged to sort of students and families taking part are encouraged to start forming up at 8:15 a.m. We're going to enter from the far end of that lot, sort of queue up in a number of long lines, and then we are starting shortly after 9 a.m. We should be starting.
great, thank you.
You got it.
Are there any other questions out there?
Yeah, through the chair, if I may.
By all means, Mr. Kokoris.
Dr. Scully, thank you for the update. I think there's just one question or one comment I want to make. First of all, I think we want to be clear that we've done everything that we can to give this class all the recognition that they deserve under the circumstances. So I think there's just one thing that we want to stress is that we are doing these two events, and the event that we'll do in July will be the traditional, obviously under the guidelines, socially distanced graduation ceremony. And this is another town-wide recognition for our class of 2020 seniors. So I just don't want that to get missed in the translation of what we're trying to accomplish this year under these kind of crazy circumstances.
Yes, I think that's well described, and that is exactly what we're trying to do. And hopefully, given the conditions that we have, we're able to make this spring, which obviously is going to be memorable for the students, but we want it to be memorable with some sites and some events that really no other class will have a chance to do. So hopefully that's the case.
Any
Thank
other
you.
comments or questions?
Yeah, through the chair, Tom.
By all means, Mr. Shave.
Dr. Scully, do we have a rain date or anything set up in case we have the thunderstorms roll through?
Not for
Or is this
Saturday.
rain or shine?
It's rain or shine. If we were to have weather that would be dangerous, we would have to implement some sort of strategy at that point. But this is rain or shine. We have some plan Bs for how we'll hand out diplomas and keep everybody safe and dry at that point. Obviously, the people in the car would be okay until they get to that diploma station. So that event Saturday is rain or shine.
Well, if it's rain or shine, do we have any tents maybe we could set up above the diploma station in case it's not a heavy downpour, but it's wet enough to ruin it for the kids?
Yeah, that's along the lines of what we have in place, is having those at the ready, sort of, pop-up canopies. We need to be cautious of the state guidance on sort of use of these things, but this would not be a large tent that's inside. This would be making sure that the diplomas are safe and secure, so that nothing is ruined for the kids.
Another question, do we have a number? I know you were handing out the caps and gowns and asking kids to fill out who would be taking their actual diploma and who would be getting the blanks. Do we have any numbers on that yet?
I haven't had a chance to compile all three houses. I was out of the office on Friday. I'll be meeting with the house masters Wednesday on this topic. It seemed to be running fairly evenly. So again, I wouldn't want to put an exact percentage on it because I don't have numbers in front of me, but I heard students in, let's say, roughly equal numbers sort of requesting either date. Like I said, that's anecdotal. That's not official. I would have to compile all 3 days to know for certain.
Any other comments? By all means.
I gotta, are we doing anything for our military kids? Because a lot of them will be shipping out because the military is accepting kids in July now. So a lot of them won't be making it for the actual ceremony. We do anything special for them? Any recognition?
Well, they'll be recognized Friday. Again, the virtual portion, we recognize one of the groups of students that we recognize is students who are enlisting, and we recognize them by name and the branch that they are entering. And then also I've had initial conversations when we were first planning with certain families who, had said, well, based on our schedule, we might not be here for this ceremony or that ceremony. and we can acknowledge them individually if their schedules don't allow for participation in one event or the other.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
I have one question, excuse
By
me.
all means, Ms. Lemire.
Okay, Dr. Scully, I know there has been some discussion and concern, so I just want to clarify. So the students are able to get their diploma at the car parade or at the in-person sit-down graduation, either or, is that correct?
Yes, they are. And what they did was when they came in last Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to get all their graduation attire, the first question they were asked by one of the House secretaries was what date they wanted their actual diploma on. And for those students who chose July 30th, we have, you can picture the graduation holder. We might call it a blank diploma, but we'd like to have sort of a, a small symbol, perhaps the varsity B, so that they can still take that photo with the holder, but they would receive their actual diploma on July 30th. And that's a choice that the House secretaries were tracking all 3 days last week.
Okay, great, thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or questions?
I just have one other comment, if no
By
one
all
else.
means, Mr. Kokoris.
I just, Dr. Scully, I hope it's clear to the students that choose to take their diploma on Saturday that they're welcome to attend the ceremony, and we'd encourage them to attend the ceremony at the end of July.
Yes, that was part of our messaging on it, but we can reiterate it to students again, is that all students are encouraged to take part in both ceremonies.
Excellent.
Whether they choose to get their actual diploma now or in July, we would still just assume have the whole class at both places. We realize that one or the other may not be possible for some families, but for anyone who it is, they are welcome at both ceremonies.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kokoris. Are there any other comments or questions?
This is Carla.
By all means, Ms.
I just want to thank you guys all for the hard work on this. I know I worked with parents and they did want a graduation, and that's all they wanted, as long as we can still have it with the numbers going down. But thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've got a couple.
This is Jen Dolan through the chair. I wanted to
Hi,
echo what Carla was saying. Thank you. I mean, it's clear that everything has been thought through to the smallest detail, and that's greatly appreciated, especially with everything being such a moving target all the time. So thank you for all the planning that's been done. And I wanted to mention anecdotally that I happened to get caught in Foxborough High's rolling graduation this weekend, and it looked like an absolute ball. I mean, cars were decorated, music blasting, horns honking. So I think if people choose to embrace this townwide celebration, I think it's really, while it may not be what people had hoped for and planned for, I think it's really going to be a great time. So thank you for all of the hard work.
Well, thank you. And yes, I think sort of we saw some successful ceremonies using this format or something similar this past weekend, and I think it can be quite a bit of fun.
Excellent. I have a few questions from the chair. Well, actually, statements to comments. I'm very glad to hear that we're going to do something that recognizes the people that are going into the armed services. Some of our best and our brightest going to serve us in a wonderful way. So I appreciate we're willing to do something for them. I love the fact that we, as administrators and whatnot, were able to listen and shall we say, morph this into what it is, which is multiple different celebrations, starting on Friday, the parade on Saturday, which I look to as being, both fun and obviously those that accept their diplomas on that day. I do hope they'll come back for the solemn ceremony, which is the graduation, the sit-down graduation ceremony at the end of July. I think it's another opportunity for this class to, say their goodbyes and be all in one place for one last time. Yes, this has been an extraordinary year, but I believe that, we're ending it on the right way for these students, letting them know how important they were for us, how much we respect their grit in their attitude to not let this define them. And I'd like to see the celebration on Saturday, obviously, and obviously on Friday, the speeches, but you also look to what will happen, at the end of July. So there's more than a few cuts of the ball, so to speak, at this. And I'm looking forward to being an active participant. Thank you, Dr. Scully.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say a couple of things.
By all means.
Just echoing everything that everyone said. I mean, I just can't even begin to tell you, I'm sure that many of you can imagine the amount of work and time and energy that went in from Dr. Scully and his staff. But I also want to make sure that, Dr. Scully mentioned the police department, and I want to make sure I personally want to, on behalf of the school department, thank Mayor Kokoris for his work around this and just being so supportive and so flexible from the very beginning of the conversations we had. He was basically, you tell me what you want to do and we will figure it out. You have our full support. So without that, we would not be able to do what we're doing. And I just want to make sure that I had a chance to thank him for it. I know I speak for the administration as well.
And
thank you, Dr. Hackett.
One last point, Dr. Hackett mentioned the staff, and I'd be remiss as well if I didn't point out that I already mentioned that Ms. Hurley, made these great graphics. The 3 house masters have worked tirelessly right through the last 6, 7, 8 days, right through the weekend, getting all the details together. Mr. Mahar, Mr. Bradford have already been out sort of scouting the locations and sort of figuring out how everything is going to work. And the maintenance staff is already thinking about sort of how each spot is going to work best. So the support from really the high school and, to be honest, the full district staff has really been terrific. So I just want to thank everyone.
Excellent. Okay, moving on. I believe.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Greatly appreciated. Do you have other yes, here we go. We got other administrative updates from Dr. Hackett.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, just to update the committee and the public on a few things that are going on besides COVID and graduation. We successfully landed, and I say when we, I mean Andrew Marin, an additional security grant. This is money beyond what we had been granted through an award, through a grant last year that we did elementary school security cameras with. But Andrew was able to secure $50,000 for additional high school security cameras. Depending on how we install these, will depend on how many cameras we'll be able to actually get. We are intending to replace quite a few of our cameras, which are way beyond their useful life. We're looking at 2 systems. We're looking at the system that we use at the elementary level as part of the grant that I just mentioned. And we're also looking at whether we go with the system that we've installed at each middle school. So those decisions will be forthcoming. And I just want to thank Andrew for his work on that. And I know he is with us, but I also just want to move on to another project that he has been spearheading for the entire town, not just the school department. This is kind of leftover work from his time at Town Hall, and that's the implementation of the Munis Finance software package. This has been a significantly major endeavor. Out of our office, Ed Cronin, Lisa Freely have just spent tremendous amounts of time, especially Lisa. I completely give it up to her at meeting after meeting after meeting and training after training. And it's been going on for all town departments and representatives of town departments for the last couple of years. So this is an exciting moment for us and for the town. The current software package we have really just is extremely limited in terms of trying to do some of the real-time reporting and analysis that we really, really need to do, especially when we're going into the situation we're going into, which looks like it's going to be very fluid from a budget standpoint, and we're very excited about it. So the first major step of this is that we are going to go live on this June 24th, this month, for general ledger items, purchase orders, and just the actual physical budget. And the hope is that we would be going live on payroll and human resources modules sometime next year. So many thanks again to Andrew on both those items and to our office here with Lisa Freely and Ed Cronin on the work that they've done in and around Munis. As part of that, we actually also were able to get the town auditing firm, Clifton Larson Allen, CLA, to conduct a full cybersecurity audit. And I would just ask if Andrew could just jump in and just kind of summarize what that's about and how we're moving forward with it.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Hackett. So we had, this was a voluntary effort that the town and the schools kind of entered into with CLA. And so part of it was to take a look at the both municipal and school operations and sort of assess our IT base there and where we were. And so within both operations, the CLA auditors looked at some of our application access and permission protocols. They did a kind of initial IT risk assessment. They looked at physical access to the buildings and those systems that we manage. They also looked at Munis and how we are implementing that, and if they had any recommendations for the remaining phases for us. And then also on the school side, they did some extra work around our network security, database administration, and some vendor administration. And so myself and the school IT team, along with Belt, will be meeting with CLA tomorrow to review their report and kind of discuss next steps from there.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Chair, I don't know whether you want to break for any questions on those items before we go on to 5.
Yeah, I believe, does anyone have any comments or questions on the administrative updates so far?
If I may, through the chair.
By all means, Mr. Kokoris.
Andrew, thank you for the update. I know when we talked about this subject the last time, we talked about a couple of things. One was penetration testing as far as the network goes. And I guess since we've been doing so much remote learning and, you know, kind of working in that area, are they gonna look at anything to do with that and how we can make that more secure?
Yes, yeah. So we do see this as a multi-year effort and kind of partnership with CLA. So this initial round was more around our policies and access controls,
Sure.
procedures, and then we look for a next round, kind of more comprehensive assessment and some penetration testing, either with CLA or there's also some state and federal government resources that offer those up as well that we're looking into. But this round we did focus on, like I said, those policies, procedures, and also end user training. We had that state grant where we had about 1,000 of our BPS employees enter a 12-hour training program to learn about cybersecurity. And we had a really good kind of success rate with that. We just completed that in May as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the update.
And that, excuse me, the chair here. Number 2, the grant awarded to BHS for more security cameras. Now, didn't we get something in the neighborhood of $80,000 before? So this will be what, put in conjunction with that?
It will be an additional amount that will fit in nicely with the initial grant. Mr. Lee, would you be able to speak to the initial grant that we got and what we did with those funds?
Certainly. If you recall, with the initial grant, we were able to add cameras throughout all the elementary sites. You know, a variety of numbers based on the size of the buildings, and all of those cameras early in the fall were up and operational, increasing the security for that. So as mentioned, this grant will allow us to now focus the efforts on the high school, where the existing camera structure is antiquated and some of them are beginning to fail. And so that would be the next step. As you know, East will get all new security cameras as part of the building projects, and when South building project commences, that would be part of that package as well. So it's an overall comprehensive look about how to expand camera coverage throughout the district.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, through the chair.
By all means, Mr. Chafe.
Mr. Lee, when we got that initial grant, didn't we throw in some extra money to buy more cameras also with that?
We did. The committee was kind enough to vote for some additional monies, which allowed us to expand coverage. Initially, we were looking at, I believe, 67 cameras. We landed with a few more, which really was all about making sure we had proper coverage in each elementary site. So when some of that money did come from operating, but it did at the end cover all the elementary schools.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we move on to other parts of the administrative update? Hearing none, proceed, Dr. Hackett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just another piece of good news that's much welcomed at this time. And we, as everyone knows, we did put statements of interest in with the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, for 5 roofs, basically each of one of our elementary schools. We did not anticipate that we were going to get all 5, which would have been a complete sweep. But we did get invited in for what is called their due diligence process for both Highlands and Liberty. And if you think about the process for school construction that we went through, this is kind of their invitation in for eligibility. So this is where they will come on site. They will do some analysis of the roofs, have conversations with us. These projects are different than school construction. The MSBA actually kind of operates the entire thing. So it's not like we have to go out and hire an owner's project manager for these. There are no ineligible costs. It's basically a straight reimbursement. So if we are able to move forward in that process, if they invite us to move along and we can provide the local funding, we could count on about a 50% reimbursement rate for each one of the roofs. So that's great news for us. That's a great opportunity. We'll keep you posted as things move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Hackett. I think it's important that people realize with what, let's just call 10 roofs that we have to try and maintain, that it's in our best interest anytime that we can, shall we say, do 2, wait a few years, do 2 more, and then wait a few years. Those life cycles don't, shall we say, come due all at the same time. It's one of the problems we've had lately, that we've had roofs that have failed all at the same time and had to go after them. This, shall we say, stepped approach, I think fiscally is a better way of going about it in the future. Thank you, Dr. Hackett. Moving on, I believe we're on 4, which is from the school committee.
Actually, if we can handle number 6 on administrative updates, I just would like to provide a high-level overview. So I know that both certainly the school committee and the public are, everyone's starting to kind of move on to what is next year going to look like. And while we don't have any as clear, firm answers to that, I do want to just update everyone on the process at the state level, and just a little bit about some of the conversations we've been having internally, and a little bit about how we're thinking about how does it make sense for us to move forward from a planning perspective. So on June 5th, the Department of Education, the Commissioner of Education, Riley, issued guidance for requirements for personal protective equipment for the reopening school. The document is available on the DESE website. The language kind of danced back and forth between what's going to be guidance and what's going to be required. The next piece of guidance that we're expecting, or document that we're expecting from the department, is the actual opening plan, how we plan to reopen. And it will be more heavy on directions and directives versus guidance. The commissioner has been clear through the governor that the state at this point is determined to reopen schools in some format in September. And the department has been working with an advisory group for quite some time now, and they will be issuing that document. We're being told we were told June 15. I'd be surprised if we got it right on time. Obviously, it's a considerable piece of work, but I know that we will get it by mid-June. So just from a planning perspective, we are a little bit at a standstill. I can have Mr. Lee talk a little bit about the work, that kind of the pre-work that's been done with principals and directors around things like scheduling and how we've been thinking about that. But first, I just wanted to share some of the highlights, if we can completely call them that, that came out of the June 5th document. So just in terms of kind of overarching points, and I think this is really important for all of us to understand, including the public, that we are going to be given a required supply items list for the initial opening, and we are supposed to be planning on 12 weeks of supplies. And point number 2, which is the point that is probably at this given time, one of the more concerning points, is that we are going to be responsible for the funding of these supplies. Now, you will recall that we will be getting some federal CARES money, but many school systems, us somewhat included, were looking to really kind of either backfill some lack of funding needs going next year. That's not our case, but certainly it is our case that we were looking to kind of be patient with how we spend those funds, knowing that FY22 could be rough. The funds we are allowed to spend the funds over a 2-year period. So, in looking at the list, there's a fairly significant amount of money that we are going to have to come up with. General guidance, nothing that would be surprising, although it does raise a lot of questions. Clearly we're encouraging staff and students to stay home if they're sick. Face coverings and masks will be required by students and staff. If it is not possible, it's just to emphasize 6 feet social distancing must be maintained. However, that's not to say that it's not required, the 6 feet distancing, if students and the staff have masks on either. And I think that for the most part, we're talking about students who may not be able to wear it for some kind of health reason, as well. Parents are responsible for providing masks, and we are to have backups for those situations where students may have forgotten, they may not have it in it, or they may lose it, all those kinds of scenarios. They're emphasizing everything that we would expect: frequent hand washing and sanitizing, and maintaining the 6 feet of separation at all times. So when we think about our buildings, clearly number 4 is going to be a challenge. And the department in the commissioner's call last week was talking about part of the directives that may be coming up soon is an actual staggered schedule, such as every other day, every other week. There was some conversation about, a little bit more conversation around every other week as a possibility, where students would come in, half the students come in for 1 week, the other half stays home and is engaged in remote learning, and then it swaps. So no decision has been made. We have been talking about those scenarios now for several weeks, and how would we approach that from a teaching and learning standpoint. There are a lot of questions, obviously. We need to come up with protocols for what happens to a student or staff member who becomes ill during the day. We are going to be required to provide an isolation room separate from the nurse's office. And right now, no classroom would be able to have more than 10 students in it. So I'm imagining that may loosen up as we head into the summer and the governor implements additional phases of reentry. New cleaning and material disposal protocols will have to be in place, which we are and would have been expecting. Specialized PPE for custodial nurses, which we would also be expecting. And in some cases for some teachers, depending on if there are teachers in a program that is generally in close contact with students, then we would need to think about that as well. And they are not recommending temperature checks at the entry due to false positives and false negatives, which was kind of new information. The discussion last week on the call was that they were heavily considering some kind of temperature checking, but this is the guidance that's coming out of the department as of June 5. Just to give you a sense for the guidelines, if they're or the recommended guidelines for actual quantity of purchases, here it is for disposable mask. Initial recommendation quantities per 100 individuals per group per school. So you can see how that just plays out across students, teachers and staff, school nurses and health providers. Fairly significant amount of masks. Same again for, additionally for members or teachers who may be in what they're calling high intensity contact with students. So I can think of like our some of our special education district-wide programs with students who need constant, regular physical redirection or need any kind of actual medical or personal hygiene support. These are the recommendations for those staff members. And then finally, building supplies, hand sanitizer, disposable nitrile gloves, and waste disposal. So there's a lot here. I'm not sharing this with you tonight because we have a plan in place for purchasing. This obviously just came out, but I did want to get it in front of you as we talk about how do we plan moving forward. So how we've been thinking about, just kind of from a structural standpoint, we would like to, as soon as we get the actual guidance from DESE for the fall opening, we think it would make an awful lot of sense to put together a steering committee with representation from various groups, particularly town officials, health and building, I think school committee member representative, administration and staff, including the teachers union, parents and students. That not entirely exhaustive list, but a broad-based group that would act as a steering committee that would then be responsible for kind of oversight and coordination with a few working groups. We're seeing 4 areas in kind of looking at what other school systems have done across the country and even in other parts of the world. But these are the major areas that we believe would benefit from an independent working group that can report back to the steering committee. So clearly, teaching and learning, social emotional supports, communication, facilities and operations to be inclusive of health and safety, personal protective equipment and cleaning protocols, logistical planning, and then of course transportation. And there has been no guidance issued yet on transportation. That's one of the items that I'm sure all of you can imagine as we think about a bus and how would we socially distance on a bus with 6 feet. It raises an awful lot of questions and concerns about how we would actually be able to pull that off logistically. So those are really the overall groups that we're thinking about with the steering committee structure. And, you know, general planning considerations, and we're talking about these from the standpoint of moving forward on these fairly soon, is doing some surveying of students, of parents, really of parents to ask the question, just simply if school is open in any way, shape, or form, whether it's full open or a hybrid model, are you planning to send your child? The department is working through protocols for what would happen if students, parents do not wish to send their students to school. A lot of considerations around existing legislation, such as required student days and seat time. And then we would also want to ask the question about whether or not parents are planning on using our buses to bring their children to school. Obviously, you know, this is the data change, people can change their minds, but we need to get some sense of the numbers in terms of what we're looking at for planning purposes. We have questions around staff attendance, the same question that we have with student attendance. We have staff members who may elect not to come back for various health reasons. We've got to talk about what is the protocol for that, how do we treat that, and you know, when you start running scenarios of percentages of staff who may not be in the building, we need to figure out a plan for how we utilize them for remote learning or for some other purposes. And then we are, as I said, we are assuming that there's going to be some kind of staggered schedule. We have to figure out how we socially distance on site. So, you know, the question of shifting spaces and staff, you know, with 10 per classroom, obviously we limit the number of students that are in at any given time. You know, do students move through hallways or do they stay put and staff moves to them? those are some of the conversations that are out there. And then I would just mention in terms of teaching and learning, and let Jim speak a little bit to how we've been talking about this so far, but the things I think that are under consideration is clearly developing a more robust remote learning plan that would include required assignments, that would include grading. This year has been obviously very unique, and getting up and running with everything has been a significant challenge for many school systems, us certainly included. And then how the department treated this year in terms of grades and peak time was very different than it will be going into next year. Creating or developing or purchasing a learning management system that would allow really centralized location of everything, just for ease of use, developing a blended core academic program so that we can be flexible with students who are in 1 week and out the next week, so that those transitions can be seamless and connected. And also taking into consideration that it could be the case that at some point, if there's a resurgence, that we have to shut down again for a period of time. So I'll let Jim speak to just kind of some of the initial planning and discussions that have been happening around teaching and learning.
Well, inclusive of that are a lot of the other issues that Dr. Hackett brought up. Some of the decisions about how we will deliver instruction and what classes will look like really do become dependent upon the attendance rate on the part of students and on staff. In the conversations that we've had around what a schedule might look like, one of the biggest concerns is how can we accommodate families in the scheduling of students. If you are a parent and you have students in multiple levels and some are on one day and off the next, and that schedule doesn't coordinate across the levels, that can be very problematic for families. So we're looking at creative ways to ensure that family members would be either on or off at the same time. In addition, one of the concerns that we've been discussing at length is some of our students have had a very difficult spring in terms of keeping up academically in a remote learning environment. And we assume when some of our students return back to school that there'll be some gaps that some populations of students will have that will need to be remediated as quickly as possible. And what would the structure look like to ensure that we are catching those kids up and getting them back on track, given the length of time that they've been out of a structured school setting, while at the same time maintaining the academic progress of all of our other students. So there are a lot of issues that really are unknown at this point, because if the state is going to come out with some directives, obviously those are things that we would have to follow along with. But we have had significant conversations about roles of staff members, course structures, how the remote learning will play into it when it's either a hybrid model or should we need to go back to a full remote scenario, and how do we increase the efficacy of that service delivery if we're going to use that extensively next year. As Dr. Hackett indicated, we did as well as we could this past spring under unique circumstances, but knowing what we now know and looking forward about what we might need to be able to provide students, we would need to refine that and have it in a better position for the start of school in the fall for both the hybrid and perhaps a more immersive remote learning plan. So we are looking at all those options. It's a little bit, as he indicated, on hold, waiting for the 15th and some more directives, but we are in a position as soon as we get that information to begin moving forward again to plan out the fall in a much more comprehensive manner.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Chair, that is all I really want to cover with this. I don't know if committee members have any questions.
Any questions or comments at this time from committee members, please?
Mr. Chair, this is
By
Kelly.
all means.
Hi. Dr. Hackett, thank you very much for putting this together. I appreciate all the work that you put into it. I've gone through the guidelines, and I'm shaking my head how some of this stuff could actually be possible. But I know it's focusing on mostly the PPE and the supplies and so forth. So, given the fact that it's saying that districts are solely responsible for obtaining and paying for this stuff, and do you have any idea right now, based on what they put out there and the numbers, what does that mean for our budget? And will the district, what do you think districts will try to outbid each other?
Thank you. Good questions. I'm not concerned about districts trying to outbid each other. The state is looking into a mechanism where they can potentially serve as the broker that would be to the state to actually purchase some of these supplies from at cost, which would obviously be helpful. And to answer your other question, just as an example, if we develop or adopt a remote learning system, many of these systems from our student information system on have a fairly significant per pupil cost. So anywhere from $20 sometimes to $30, depending on the system. Sometimes it's less than that. So, from my perspective, we're hopeful that the economy holds. We know we have eventually going to have the CARES money come in once we figure out how much of that the private schools are going to be eligible for. I just think it's going to have to be a matter of prioritization. We know we absolutely have to deal with the health and safety items first, right? So, and I've said before, I think at some point we can only do the best we can do. I think we have to be very transparent about what we're doing and what we are going to be able to confidently provide and let people know that. And to a certain extent, it's not unlike people making personal decisions for themselves right now. I mean, there are people who are deciding still not to go to grocery stores because they have a compromised immunity system, and they don't want to take that risk. At some point, I think it's going to come down somewhat to risk tolerance and individual parents decisions around, and staff around, whether or not they're comfortable with the environment. We're obviously all hopeful that as we progress through the summer, that the numbers will continue to be favorable. But again, I think the key of this, through the steering committee, through the work groups, is really going to be developing a plan that first on the health and safety, that is really judicious about how it spends the funding that will be available. And then again, just really communicate both during the process, but also when we get closer to the end of it, what is this going to look like for us?
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
If I might, through the chair.
By all means, Mr. Koukouris.
Dr. Hackett, were you able to get that document for President? Okay. So just to answer Ms. Cobb-Lemare and questions the other committee members may have, I think we have been expecting some of the guidance that came out, but I think the requirement for the PPE adds a little bit of a unknown as far as what that cost would do to the budget. And as other school committees kind of ponder that guidance, we did get direction, and you'll see up on the screen a resolution that many committees are considering adopting to send to the governor, the secretary, and the leaders of the Senate and the House, just to reiterate that the cost that will be mandated for COVID-19 safety would be reimbursed by the state. So this is something I wanted the committee to consider and look at tonight. If you feel you're ready to move forward, we could certainly go through it and vote on it this evening. But I think it's definitely a concern of many school districts, including ours, and what the ultimate cost of that mandated PPE will be. I talked to Dr. Hackett this week, and there were some estimates from some school districts that it could be as high as 1.7 million. I think that might have been a little bit inflated, but it will definitely have an impact on the planning that we've done so far. And it's certainly something I would like the committee to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Koukouris. Without us actually knowing the ramifications, and shall we say, this is going to solidify over the next few weeks. I believe we'll have more and more pertinent information as we wait a little while. Please, George, walk me through what you're trying to accomplish with this type of a motion now.
Well, ultimately, as Dr. Hackett mentioned, there's a lot of guidance so far, but right now, from what we've seen, this PPE requirement is being mandated. So, while we're all very excited and, obviously we can't wait to have in-person classes back in session, we also want to be aware of the additional cost that guidance will bring to the district.
Okay, I'm with you on that. And I think that those preliminary numbers, I mean, as we, shall we say, go forward with this, the numbers are going to become a little bit more clear. And is there any give and take with the state on this? So this just came out, today? So I would like to think there'd be some give and take between us and the people that are putting forth this mandate.
If I could, Mr. Chair,
Please.
I agree with you. I think that if we could just put a little bit of distance between the issuance of this information we received this week from the Commissioner's office before we take any kind of action, because I got to believe that there's a lot of feedback taking place right now. In fact, I know there is. It also gives a little bit more time to play out some of the numbers and some hypotheticals, perhaps. You'll take up tonight to get back to your regular meeting schedule. You do have a meeting, if you approve the calendar for the 22nd, which I think would be really good timing because it's before the close of the fiscal year. And that's not to say that we can't be contacting our legislators in between now and then to ask questions and just express concerns about the funding.
I just wanted to, just to be clear, I wanted to bring it to the attention of the committee. I think the timing of our next meeting actually works out perfectly. So we'll get the updated guidance, but this is definitely something that we need to work hard to, make sure that things that are mandated, we get some kind of reimbursement on.
I think there's many of us right now, the wheels are turning as to how we will, each and every one of us will have some type of a role in seeing how, we can accomplish that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Corse. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Jen Dolan through the chair.
By all means, Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Dr. Hackett and Mr. Lee, for bringing this information to us. Obviously, it's a hot topic on all parents' minds as to what school is going to look like when we go back in the fall. So I think it's good for people to hear even what the possibilities are, just so they can begin planning. But I think, while we always say, and I've said it myself, that school is not daycare, it presents a tremendous concern for working parents, and who's kidding who, for, probably the greatest impact will be on working mothers with this kind of potential for a split schedule. So at the state level or at the town level, even though it's not really our job, if we're talking about the care and education of children, have there been any conversations or considerations for any kind of wraparound care or, additional services that might be able to be provided for people who work?
It's definitely on our mind. We've just in a very, very big conceptual way, really mainly just, I think it was mainly Mr. Lee and myself in the conference room, just thinking about all of the considerations. And we completely understand as both parents ourselves that we do provide, not only do we provide education to students, but we also provide a necessary service of caring for their children while they are at work. And that's been part of the conversations around it. Is 1 week on, 1 week off the best model? I'm kind of hoping the commissioner doesn't mandate the actual schedule model, but I can understand also, is with every other school system, a big number of our teachers are also parents who live in other communities. So if we're on a different schedule, a different model than where our teachers live, then that's going to create a whole nother set of issues for our staff, which then will impact how they're able to think about their own work day. Hopefully, as we continue to roll out, the governor continues to open up and go through the phases, that the best case scenario is that child care is in place, obviously, but we have talked about there anything that we could figure out, and I think we may be getting some guidance from the state on that. But again, one of our challenges, as you all know, is just we have our own space issues in terms of thinking about, providing any kind of service like that. Not to mention the fact that, we would have to go through a whole certain process if we're talking about students under a certain. So all of this is on the table. There's no bad idea. And again, what we presented to you tonight is certainly not exhaustive. There's been much more that we've talked about, and I'm sure there's more things that we even really thought that will benefit from a larger group with more sets of eyes.
Great, thank you. Yes, I can imagine it's one of about a million things you guys have been talking about. And do you get a sense that on the 15th, we might have guidance as specific as it's every other week, or it's 2 days on, 3 days off, something that, again, specific in terms of the directive that we'll be getting that soon?
That is what the commissioner has been messaging, that by mid-June, we will have a document that will be 85 to 90% directive, 10 to 15% with some local control or to accommodate for local circumstances. And also, I believe, probably in a process of kind of an appeal process where a school system could say, I know this is your directive, but we really can't do it this way because of X, Y, and Z. This is how we plan to do it. In a process where the department would have to give permission for that alteration to the plan. But the commissioners was very, as directed as he has been, we all know what's been coming out up to this point. It's been guidance, but understandably, the department really needs to, and we welcome some clear directives as to how this is going to go. But at the same time, there's got to be some flexibility built in. And when we just think about certain school systems in certain parts of the state, from the inner cities to Western Mass, think about a Western Mass school system where bus ride to school is 45 minutes to an hour. How do you do transportation in that environment and even be able to run a day? So, I do think, however, to answer your question, that it will be pretty prescriptive and that it will get into very, very fine detail.
Great, thank you. And my last question is, do we have a sense that number of 10, I'm sorry, I think I missed when you were mentioning this before, that number of 10 could actually go up?
I would anticipate that it would, just from the standpoint of if the numbers continue to trend in the state favorably in terms of the infection rate, I gotta believe that the hope on their end is that they would be able to loosen up on that number some. I mean, when I think about this, and right now, 25% occupancy is within the governor's directive, and when you think about 25%, and it's 25% of any space within the building. So it's not 25% of your building occupancy, but think about an 800 square foot classroom, 25%, I would say that's right around 10 kids and a couple of adults. So obviously in a gymnasium, and we're going to be able to have more than 10 kids in it. I think there'll be some, hopefully some common sense around being able to adapt to the size of the spaces, because we're going to need that kind of flexibility. And then hopefully is in the general public, it goes 25% occupancy to maybe at some point 50%, that we would be affected as well as systems.
I'm sorry, I lied. I do have one more question.
By all means, Ms. Dillon.
Thank you. So after that guidance comes out on the 15th, do we anticipate, I guess, pretty shortly thereafter, polling parents as to what their thoughts are in terms of will you send your children or won't you?
Yes, we want to have that data before we go into July.
Okay.
And I think that it would make some sense for us to dip into that a couple of times over the course of the summer, to the extent that people are going to be paying attention and answering our questions.
Okay.
I mean, 'cause the answers to those questions will in large part drive what we're going to be able to deliver in the fall. If we don't know or have a sense of what the numbers of students is going to be and or staff, it'll be very difficult to put together a cogent plan ready for September. So regardless of how many times we need to ask the question, that's information that we're going to need to have some grip on as we develop the plan for the fall.
Makes sense. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Ms. Dolan. Are we ready to move on? Dr. Hackett?
I believe we are. So now we are at section 4
Okay.
from the school committee.
Okay, great. In your package, you have our proposed summer school committee meetings. Obviously, we've got Monday, June 22nd. We have Monday, July 13th. Monday, July 27th. Monday, August 10th. And Monday, August 24th. One of the reasons for getting back to this is getting some type of normalcy back, in that the week prior of that, on Mondays and Tuesdays, I'll be reaching out to each and every one of you as far as your input as to the agenda, solidifying the agenda on Wednesdays with the good doctor, having the packages to us on Thursdays so that we can have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to be able to look through them and come up with our best plans going forward. And I think these plans, these meetings as we have them, are going to be so important based on what we just discussed and some of the things that aren't quite solidified from the state and whatnot. So we put these forward to you. Any comments or questions? Again, any comments or questions on these proposed meetings?
No.
Okay, great. I guess we're looking for a motion to approve. A motion and a second.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion by Mr. Kokoris and a second by Mr. Chafe. Roll call vote. Mr. Mayor,
Aye.
Ms. Soros,
Aye.
Mrs. Cobb-Lemare,
Aye.
Mrs. Dolan,
Aye.
Mr. Kokoris,
Aye.
Mr. Chafe,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. This is unanimous as far as accepting and adopting these proposed school meetings, dates and times. We can expect that they will be put up on our website, Dr. Hackett, ASAP.
Yep, we'll get them up. And I would just say, and I know that you all get this, but I think if we learned anything from the environment we're working in right now, is that things can change rapidly. So those dates are what we want to have, planned out and scheduled in. But it could be the case that the department releases something we're not expecting, and we need to bring you together, in between those dates. So I would just ask that you continue to be flexible with some of this stuff, because it's just, it's just constantly changing.
Doctor, I believe you're correct in that things are constantly changing, and we know that we're going to get different directives from different entities from the state. But we also know that, we have our business that keeps on churning out. The fact that we have our school building committee that meets, we have our policy and education subcommittee that meets, as well as our finance and operations. So, yes, things from the state and whatnot might change, but those things are those are the things we do on a weekly, monthly basis. So I think it's in our best interest to try and get back to some type of a schedule.
Yep, not questioning that at all, just to make sure everyone remembers the environment that we have.
Okay, moving on. Subsection B, the school building committee update. I believe, Dr. Hackett, you have some updates that you had a meeting with our OPM.
Just basically, obviously, pretty regular conversation with Mike Carroll from Hill International, as well as Mr. Sheehan, the East Middle School principal, who's continues to do a tremendous job, just on site all the time, and very much paying attention to and the actual work as it goes on a daily basis. There's been, there was a little bit of a break, or I should say, or delay due to COVID, but at the same time, there were some trades that stayed on site that we made actually accelerated progress. And if there's anything that's positive about not having kids in a building, it's the fact that there can be work done all day long. because we would be working around students right now if they were there. It's probably the only positive thing I can think of, but so we have caught up on any delay that we had with COVID. We are still anticipating that the building will be ready for occupancy early summer. I would say mid-July-ish, late July-ish. Obviously, there's still going to be punch list items. Those items could continue, in fact, through the fall, depending on, and I'm talking about small things that can be done off hours. Right now, we are in within phase 2. The existing academic wing, the original part of the building is still under renovation, along with the original cafeteria. And the old gym are making good progress. Is making good progress. The old gym now has the skylights in it. It's just amazing the difference that gym it looks brand new. The exterior work we're also making good progress with that, with landscaping, sidewalks. They actually were paving right now the main drop-off parent loop, the parking lot off to the right of the building as you're looking at the building. And again, punch list items are happening, and we should be seeing the construction trailers coming out of the site fairly soon. Hill and Shamit will set up within the building for just coordination offices, but the trailers themselves will be leaving the site, which is really kind of a huge deal because they've been here for a long time now. So all in all, good progress. We don't have any concerns at this point in time of opening, being able to get our 5th grade students up to the school. Obviously, we're at the same time dealing with opening that's going to look a lot different. But just wanted to give you an update on that progress.
Thank you, Dr. Hackett. Moving on to C, we have our Policy and Education Subcommittee Chairperson, Ms. Dolan.
Sure. So the Policy and Education Subcommittee met earlier, today's Monday, that would be last week. And we talked about moving forward a few policies as we have been from the MASC policy book, so to speak, that they provide to us. So we took a look at some of the Series A policies that we did not yet have in place. There was one, the wellness-related policy, that we've actually tabled to get some additional input on, but there are 3 that we'd like to bring to the full committee this evening. So the first one is policy AB, the people in their school district. So it is a policy that talks about maintaining and acting as a representative body for the members of the community. So we, excuse me, just having a little connectivity issue for a second here. So that is forth this evening. Are there any questions about this one in particular? Okay. If everyone is comfortable, would it be possible to get a motion to approve this policy? I just want to make sure, can people hear me? I'm sorry if I'm breaking up here.
Can you hear me, Jen?
I can.
You broke up a little bit off and on, but and I'm seeing members now unmuting themselves to take a vote for. And this again is approval for first reading.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Through the chair, that's what I was gonna. This is just approval for first reading, not approval.
I'm sorry. You're right. Yep.
Yeah.
My mistake.
So I will make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so we have both a motion and a second. We will conduct a roll call vote on this. Or Dr. Hackett, do you think it's okay to do the roll call after all 3?
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Point of order. A point of order is, yes, you are the chairperson of that. If you'd like, I can do the chair as far as taking the roll call vote.
Oh,
It
sure.
can't be through that way. That's why I was asking you. I was muted, and then for some reason there was a conductivity motion there, problem there. So you surmise it, and then we're asking almost for like a same night action on this, which I don't think is in our best interest on any of it.
We lost you for a little bit. I think.
Yeah, we lost you, Tom.
Yeah, I know.
It's been explained as a first reading.
It's a first reading.
Yes. There's no reason to have any type of a motion or a second or a vote on it. It's not binding.
Correct. You have historically
Correct.
taken action on a first reading, but
That's correct, yeah. So I'll withdraw that motion. You're correct.
Okay. So you had your first one, which was
AB, people in their school district. Sorry, I'm the one who
No worries.
I think has goofed up this whole thing. So
no worries at all.
moving forward, we'll talk about the next one, which is AD mission statement. And so the MASC policy boilerplate, if you will, came with a fairly generic mission statement. And so what we decided to do instead was to put in our specific mission statement as well as some of our values as a district. And so when you review this policy for our second reading at our next meeting and approval, you will see that we've pulled the information that we share publicly on our website in terms of our specific mission statement. And then finally, the third one is policy ADC, tobacco products on school premises prohibited. So the boilerplate policy from MASC talks about the types of products that are prohibited and that both students and staff members are subject to this policy. We did insert a line into the boilerplate that points people to our handbooks as a more specific reference for execution of this policy. So, you know, again, we just tweaked the language a little bit in there to indicate that there's some additional detail present within the handbook. So we can get copies of these to the members of the committee to take a closer look at. And if you find yourselves with any questions, please plan to bring them to our next meeting. If there are no questions or if we're able to resolve them sort of on the spot, we'll be looking for a vote on that. And then we plan to meet again where we will continue the conversation about any sort of set aside Series A policies, as well as moving on to some of the boilerplate policies for Series B.
Okay. Is that the entirety of your report, Madam Chairman?
It is.
Thank you
Yes.
very much. Okay. I think we all know where we are with that.
Mr.
Take it
Chair?
home. Wonderful reading. Comment? Yes.
Yeah,
Ms.
Mr.
Lemon?
Chair, excuse me. I was just wondering, to Jen, is there possible when we vote on these, is there a way to look at the policies and compare them to what the other policies were? Do you have like a red line version of like things that we're updating or adding? I know if it's a policy we don't even have in existence, that's fine. But if we already have a tobacco policy, you know, can you show us what you're adding or tweaking from the original policy?
Sure. In these cases, we actually don't have any. These would be new. Our tobacco information, if you will, has always been included in detail in the handbook. So we're making it sort of a formal policy here. But to your point, if we do get to a situation where we're revising an existing policy, absolutely, we can sum up what has changed.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I guess we're on to D, which is our Finance and Operations Subcommittee update. Chairman Koukouris, are you ready to, or is it Dr. Hackett?
Oh,
Who will
thank
be
you.
leading us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor, for putting up the slide. So this was the budget that we discussed a couple of weeks ago and took our vote on. And as you all know, and I'm happy to report, the annual town meeting was last week and the full council met and approved the town budget, which included our recommended budget of $73,218,902. You know, I want to just take a minute to, I know the work that was done by many people to get us to this point, and I want to recognize some of those, and I hope I don't miss too many. Obviously, I want to thank the members of the Finance and Operations Subcommittee, Ms. Saros and Mr. Devon. You know, we met multiple times to go through this when times were a little different, and you know, I'm proud of the work that everyone did to get us here, and to get us to a point that we could bring this forward. Certainly, Dr. Hackett, Ed, and Lisa, and your staff, I think, you know, you did great work to get the information in front of us so we could make the right decisions to fund our budget for next year. Obviously, the members of the Ways and Means Committee, I think they had significant questions, and I think they were thoughtful. There are lots of new members there, and I thought that, you know, that process went as it should have, and worked out well. Certainly the mayor and staff and the town council and other members of the school committee. So as we talked about a little earlier this evening, you know, our work is not done just because the budget is approved. We certainly have a lot of work ahead of us to continue to monitor the financial situation, the, you know, the updated mandates for going back to school in the fall, and anything else that comes before us as far as finance and operations. So we will continue to meet fairly regularly. We will put a schedule out. I think it's probably prudent for us to do that, as the school committee has. And obviously we would have the same recommendation that if we need to meet more frequently because of updates, we'll certainly do that. But I just want to thank everyone for helping us get through the budget process and the budget season. And, you know, certainly I feel like we're in a much better place than many of the districts and even the state in this regard. And hopefully that will just put us that much further ahead as we get ready to go back to school in the fall. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Kokoris. Greatly appreciate all the work that you put into it, and obviously central office and everyone that, you know, we do have a subcommittee. It was nice to hear other members, you know, shall we say, making their opinions known. It helped when we got into our subcommittee that we kind of had a nice knowledge of what that climate was. Again, Mr. Kokoris, your leadership was second to none. I think that's why we were so successful. Thanks again to you and to Dr. Hackett, all the people in central office, and there are many people you would have to thank. Moving on, we're on to public comment. I guess Dr. Hackett, you're the person that will see if anyone has their hands raised that has a question in the audience.
We do have a couple. I will unmute John Cass. Mr. Cass?
Mr. Cass, welcome. Mr. Cass, are you still with us?
He's muted.
Hold on, working on it.
Okay.
Okay, he should be unmuted. Sorry.
Mr. Cass, how are you, sir? Okay. And yeah, I'm not seeing him. Oh, wow.
He has his hand up.
Yeah.
He does have his hand up, and for some reason, we can't call on that hand.
Well,
Maybe we can move to one of the other folks and come back to him.
Yeah, yes. What do you say? Is there another person we can move on to and then come back to Mr. Cass?
yeah, Ms. Ricardo.
Ms. Ricardo, how are you this evening?
Good. How are you, everyone? Hello. I just want
Welcome.
to say truly thank you. Like, I get it. Everyone has been working really hard, and I can't thank everyone enough for all of the work and energy that's going into this. I just want to throw it out there. I understand the fall is, we're not really sure. My question is, will parents have the option to opt out of the fall plan? Let's say, okay, we're going to have 10 kids in a classroom. Kids are going to need to be in masks. We're going to do 2 days and/or 3 days a week. Will parents have the option to say, no, thank you. We're going to do exclusive learning from home? Because not every kid is going to fit that model. And I say that from my heart, for my own little guy, and a lot of kids who have special needs. My little guy is not going to be able to hang out in a face mask. Sensory motor integration is pervasive throughout kids who have special needs. And I just question, will parents have the option to pick and choose? Hey, you know what? That will not work. And the inconsistency, 2 days on, 3 days off, it's not going to work for every kiddo.
I think that
Short answer to that question, if I could. We would not be the ones prohibiting that flexibility, that choice. We're expecting that will actually be included in the commissioner's document coming out this month. So the commissioner really is the one who has to make determinations on what a school day looks like, remote learning considerations. So, and I know that in the discussions he's had with superintendents, that is under consideration. I can't imagine that he would not allow school districts to allow that kind of flexibility with certain parents and students.
Okay, because I mean, honestly, I speak for myself, I speak for other parents. The conversation we're having with our he's in 4th grade, going into 5th grade. And our conversation with him right now is, you know what, guy, you may not be starting school in September. We might continue with online learning. And we've implemented a reading specialist and a speech specialist on our end, and it's working out very well for us. We're not leading him to believe that he is going to go off to the East Middle School, the new school, and life is going to move on, because managing the kids' expectations is as important as managing the parents and the adult expectations here. So
thank you.
That's where we are.
Sure. No, I think what you're saying is it's on the minds of, of anyone in our central office. I know that we've had discussions as to, what it's going to look like broken down from your high school to your middle school to your elementaries. So, and it's not, I don't believe it's a one size fits all. It's just, we know that won't work. So stay tuned. I think we're going to have more information. How's that?
Okay. That's a start. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Were we able to help Mr. Cass? Okay. Any other public comment? Dr. Hackett?
Can you hear me?
We hear somebody.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Yes, it's John Cass.
Mr. Cass.
Oh, hi. How are you? Sorry
Good.
about
How
that.
are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Good. So I appreciate this evening very much. I had a couple of comments. I had a chance to read the letter from the Department of Education. On the issue of no temperature checks, I was wondering if we could take a different approach. Don't forget, it wasn't this state that shut down first, but other local school districts, first with the schools with positive tests, and then the Metro West area, then larger cities, and then Boston, and finally the state. So it's actually okay for us to take the lead when the state requires something. And the reason I say that is that I looked up the CDC rules, and they're actually suggesting that people take temperature checks. And I've also seen a couple of articles from schools in Oregon, which are not open, but some of the schools were open for emergency workers, and they're taking temperature checks as well. So while the state might actually recommend something, I think it's okay for us as a school district to do something different, because I think what's been interesting in this whole COVID-19 thing, it's the local approach that's really, really won out. Don't forget what happened in the early days. It was the local schools that closed, then finally Boston, then finally the state. So while we are getting those recommendations, we can still take the initiative there. On the point about coming back, do what you can to put another proposal in place so that if parents don't want to send their kids back at this point until there's a vaccine, then give them that option. And also, if we do have those rules in place where, you know, there's only 10 students, it's actually going to be very helpful to the school district if some parents don't send kids back. So actually having those rules in place is going to be very important. And I think you covered some of that in today's presentation, Dr. Hackett, so I appreciate that. Another suggestion I have is, why don't we require that all students have a flu shot before attending school? You know, the flu is already out there. It's not COVID-19, obviously, but, you know, if everybody can get a flu shot, it might actually, if people are attending, it might actually cut down on false positives for COVID-19. So that was a suggestion that I had. And really appreciate all the work that you've done, and just keep on doing a good job. We appreciate it as parents.
Thank you, Mr. Cass. Your comments are duly noted. We have had conversations on more than a few of them, as far as, you know, let science dictate and things such as that, and us leading rather than following. Thank you for your suggestions. They're greatly appreciated, but we will look into them. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Dolan.
Excellent. Okay, I believe, are there any other public comments?
Yes, Joe Marie Cruz. I'm gonna see if I can get this to work.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Ms. Cruz, how are you this evening?
Good, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to ask my question. I'll keep it brief. I know that the meeting is running quite long for you all, but Dr. Hackett mentioned a steering committee earlier in the meeting, and I know that you're pretty much on a holding pattern till June 15th, but I just didn't know if you envisioned some sort of, I don't know, schedule, or how you are kind of envisioning that to come to be if you're kind of waiting to this June 15th date. That was just my question of kind of a scheduling for that.
Sure.
Excellent question.
So just, yes, the short answer would be yes. Once we get the guidance, you know, obviously the goal with the steering committee is to get good representation and people who are close to the issue. And that's not to say that's the only mechanism for which we would be getting input. The hope would be with communication plan that we could float out ideas and conversations that are happening. We may even be able to Zoom some of the meetings depending on the topic, but so the short, you know, we definitely will have a meeting scheduled, recognizing that everyone's busy. We definitely have a timeline that we have to meet.
Okay, thank you
We will put forth that timeline too.
Great, thank you.
Okay, does that conclude our public comment for this evening?
I do not see any more hands.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for everyone. I believe I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, roll call vote to adjourn.
We need
Mr.
a second.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Mayor,
Aye.
Ms. Soros,
Aye.
Ms. Cobb-Lemaire,
Aye.
Ms. Dolan,